Hey there. Tonight, you're going back to a world where silence wasn't safety. It was survival. The wind howls through a narrow alley, carrying the stench of rotting hay, damp stone, and fear. You're not dreaming. Not really. You're stepping into a world where one wrong word could be your last. A world where justice had teeth, and the truth didn't always matter. This is the Middle Ages, and tonight you don't just hear history, you live it. Your breath comes slower now. You're standing at the edge of a village square, its muddy ground soaked with memories of blood and judgment. The wooden post at the center isn't just decoration, it's where a thief was nailed last week. Someone whispered too loudly during Mass yesterday, and no one's seen him since. And you're not safe here. Not from the law, not from the church, and certainly not from your neighbors. Here, a loaf of stolen bread could cost you a hand. Saying the wrong thing about the king could lose you your tongue. And if you know too many herbs, well, you might burn for that. No trial, no jury, no appeals, just punishment, swift and public, so the rest remember. You don't need to be guilty in this world. You only need to be accused. The laws are written in Latin, but pain speaks every language. The prisons are full. The gallows creak like tired trees in the wind. The firewood is always stacked, just in case. And yet, life carries on. People laugh, drink, kiss, pray, but always under the shadow of knowing that anyone, even the innocent, can be next. So tonight, you'll lie still and let the sounds of the past pull you in. The flicker of a torch, the clang of iron, the whisper of accusation. You'll feel the rope, the chains, the cold breath of a watching crowd. You'll live through 10 crimes, 10 ancient sins that brought torture, exile, humiliation, or death. Crimes that seem absurd now, but back then, they were fatal. Don't try to run, don't try to explain, because in this world, the sentence comes first, and you're already guilty, stealing a loaf and losing a hand. You're starving, not "I missed supper" hungry, not the kind of hunger that growls once and fades. No, this is the hunger that makes your bones ache and your hands shake, the kind that wakes you up in the middle of the night and gnaws at your belly like a wild animal. You haven't eaten in 2 days. Your last crust of rye was shared with a younger brother who wept into your chest, while you whispered lies about better days coming. And now, under a grey and cloud-heavy sky, your feet carry you toward the village market. The air smells of wood smoke and roasted onions. You pass stall after stall, each one overflowing with what you cannot touch. Salt fish, meat pies, wheels of soft white cheese, and then bread, warm, golden, crusted, still steaming from the oven. The baker turns to argue with a customer, and your hand moves on its own. You don't even feel the loaf as your fingers curl around it. Just warmth, a dizzy, impossible warmth. Then you feel his hand, calloused, heavy, like stone wrapped in flesh. The baker roars, grabbing you by the arm. You try to pull away, but you're weak. Your legs stumble. The bread falls to the dirt, trampled by a horse's hooves. A crowd gathers faster than bees to honey. "He's a thief," the baker yells. "Tried to rob me right from the stall." Someone throws a rotten cabbage. Another shouts, "String him up." You open your mouth to explain, to beg, but it's no use. The villagers don't want words. They want punishment. Within an hour, you're bound and standing in the center of the square. The local reeve reads your confession, words you didn't speak, carved in ink by hands you've never seen. The sentence is simple. 1 hand, gone. The blacksmith prepares the iron blade. It's red hot already. You can't stop shaking, not from pain, not yet, but from knowing what comes next. The priest offers you a sip of watered wine, mumbles a prayer, and looks away when you meet his eyes. And then the butcher steps forward. Not the baker. No, he wouldn't dirty his hands. It's the butcher who swings the blade. The world erupts into light and sound. There's a scream. You're not sure it's yours. Your vision dims. The air stinks of blood and smoke. You fall to your knees. You didn't even eat the bread. Heresy in the shadows. The candle burns low, the wax pooling like blood around the base. You're in your home, if it can be called that, a one-room cottage built from timber, clay and prayer. The night wind hisses through the cracks in the shutter. Still, you whisper. You weren't trying to cause trouble, you were only wondering aloud. A harmless question. What if the earth moves around the sun? What if the church is mistaken? Not wicked, just wrong. The person you said it to was a friend, or so you thought. By dawn, you're taken. Rough hands yank you from your bed, drag you barefoot through the mud. The village watches in silence, heads bowed, not in pity, but in relief. They're not the ones being accused. You are marched to the castle's outer walls, down into the cold stone crypts beneath the chapel, where no birds sing and no light reaches. You sit on a wooden chair worn smooth by too many frightened bodies before you. Chains bite your ankles. Your wrists ache. The air smells of mould, incense, and something worse. The Inquisitor enters with a rustle of scarlet and parchment. He is not angry. Worse, he is calm. He speaks to you in a soft, measured tone. He calls you lost, not evil. He wants to help you return to the truth. But you must confess first. You say nothing. There is nothing to confess. He nods. The tools are brought in, not all at once. First, the iron pincers, rusted at the tips. Then the rack, its ropes frayed and sticky with the sweat of the last soul who graced it. And the hot tongs. Always the tongs. They don't break you immediately. They give you time. Time to reflect. Time to starve. Time to listen to the screams from the next chamber. By the third day, you can no longer tell whether the pain is in your body or your soul. You say what they want to hear, that you doubted, that you were led astray, that Satan visited you in dreams. You even name names. They mark your confession with a cross and prepare the stake. Recanting is good, but justice must still be served. The villagers will gather for the burning. They always do. Some will cry, some will cheer. You'll be bound with wet rope so you don't die too quickly. In this world, questioning isn't thinking, it's treason, and treason burns. The witch who wasn't the first sign is a sick cow. Its belly swells unnaturally, its legs buckle. By dusk it lies dead in the mud, flies already gathering. The villagers cross themselves. They whisper. They look toward your hut at the edge of the forest, the one with the herb bundles hanging from the rafters, and smoke that always smells just a bit different. Then a child catches fever. Then two. The healer's remedies don't work this time, and in a place ruled more by fear than fact, they need someone to blame. And your knowledge, your strange teas, your charms, your way of speaking to animals like they understand, has always made them uneasy. At first, it's only whispers. She knows things. She never marries. She talks to the wind. You hear them. You pretend not to. You've lived your life quietly, offering poultices and comfort to anyone who asked, even those who now look away as you pass. But then, The priest preaches about the devil in his Sunday sermon, not directly about you, not yet, but his eyes linger, and that night someone throws stones at your door. The next morning, they come. A group of men, some neighbours, some strangers, surround your home. They do not knock, they break the door. They pull you out by your arms. Your hair is tangled, your hands stained with soil. You try to speak, but someone spits in your face. You're dragged barefoot through the village. A wooden frame has already been prepared in the square. The ducking stool. The crowd watches in silence as you are bound to it with leather straps, your legs and arms immobilized. The water churns below, brown and cold. Witches float, they say. The water rejects the cursed. You are lowered slowly, your lungs tightening before your skin even touches the surface. You go under, and the world is muffled and cruel. The water burns. Your chest seizes. Then, you're yanked back up. Cheers. You floated, they say. You floated too much. No one notices that the straps around your arms held you upright, that your screams were not confessions. They bring you to the priest. He asks questions about the devil, about pacts, about shadows that visit you in dreams. You deny it all. They keep you awake for days. The air is thick with candle smoke. You begin to see things. Eventually you say what they want to hear. Anything to end it. You speak names, you cry out prayers, you beg for death. They grant your wish. The pyre is built on the third day. You're tied to the post with wet rope, so the fire will last longer. The crowd gathers again. Some cry. Most just watch. You smell pitch and splinters and singed wool. You hear the priest's voice, distant now, as if coming from the clouds. They say you were a witch, but you were only a woman who knew too much, speaking ill of the king. It was just a joke, the kind that bubbles up after too many ales by the fire. The room was thick with smoke and laughter, and someone mentioned the king, his hunting dogs, his jeweled robes, the ridiculous size of his feathered hat. You added a quip, something about how his belly enters a room before he does. Laughter, spilled drink. A good night, you thought. But someone wasn't laughing. 2 days later, you're woken before dawn by fists on the door. You open it to the tip of a sword and a gloved hand that clamps your shoulder like iron. In the name of the crown, the man says, as if that explains anything. You don't resist. You know it won't help. You are dragged through town, and no one meets your eyes. You're not shackled, not yet, but your hands tremble like they're already bound. At the edge of the village, a royal clerk awaits on horseback. He reads from a scroll. Sedition, disrespect, treasonous speech. You try to protest, to explain, to laugh again and show it was only jest. But jokes don't travel well up the chain of power. At the castle, you are taken to the lower cells, not the ones for thieves or drunks, but the narrow, dark places where the king keeps those who question his image. The walls drip moisture. The air smells of rust and rot. Somewhere nearby, a man screams. They don't torture you, not right away. First, they make you wait. Days pass, no food, no fire, only questions. Did anyone else laugh? Were you drunk? Were you mocking his grace intentionally? Did you speak of rebellion? Eventually they decide you're not dangerous, just disrespectful. You won't hang, but you won't leave untouched. They parade you through the village, stripped to the waist, a placard hung around your neck. Spoke ill of the king. You are lashed in front of the same crowd that once laughed with you. No one laughs now. Each strike burns down your spine, a red-hot reminder that words can cost flesh. When it's over, you lie in the dirt, blood soaking into the earth. A boy spits near your face. A priest walks by, not stopping. You survive, but your tongue is never quite so loose again. And the king, wherever he is, never hears your name. He doesn't have to. His fear has already done its work. Wearing what you shouldn't, you only wanted to feel proud. The cloth shimmered in the sun like water, a rich violet hue no one in your family had ever owned. It had been left behind by a passing merchant, perhaps dropped by mistake, perhaps abandoned out of haste. You found it in the mud by the roadside, carefully folded it, and took it home like a treasure. For days you did nothing but admire it. Then one night, by firelight, you stitched it into a tunic. Simple, yes, but elegant. And when you wore it the next morning, stepping into the village square, you felt something you hadn't in years. Dignity. You forgot for a moment who you were, and the law did not forgive such lapses. The reeve spotted you almost instantly. His expression curdled like spoiled milk. You know the sumptuary laws, he growled, gripping your shoulder. You're a miller's son, not a duke. You protested, said the cloth was found, not bought, that you meant no harm, that you didn't even know violet was forbidden. He didn't care. You were dragged before the manor court. They said you had pretended to be noble, that you had mocked the sacred divisions of society, that your clothing was a lie. The punishment was swift and public. You were tied to a post in the center of the square, and the tunic, the one you'd so lovingly stitched, was torn from your body and burned in front of you. You stood shirtless in the cold, the smoke rising like a curse, but it didn't end there. You were made to wear a placard for 7 days. Imposter, pretender. You slept in the stocks. Children mocked you. Women averted their gaze. And the nobleman whose colour you had dared to wear, he rode by without so much as a glance. He didn't need to look. His world had already corrected itself. When they released you, the villagers didn't forget. You became a warning, a story whispered to young boys who admired anything too fine, all because you wore the wrong colour. In the Middle Ages, your clothes didn't just define you, they controlled you, and stepping out of your station, even in cloth, was enough to be branded for life. Murder, even in defence. It happened fast. You didn't wake up that morning thinking you'd kill a man. All you wanted was to finish your work and collect your pay. But the tavern was loud, the ale was flowing, and tempers were sharp as blades. He bumped into you, a stranger, heavy with drink. He spilled your cup, then laughed. You stepped back, let it go. But he didn't. He followed, called you names, pushed you, said things about your sister, your mother, things that make blood rise like boiling water. You tried to leave. He grabbed your collar, shoved you hard. You fell, scraping your palms on the stone. When you stood up, you saw his knife, small, meant for gutting meat, not men, but it caught the torchlight like fire. You didn't think. There was a rock by your foot, jagged, heavy. You swung. Once, he dropped. The silence in the tavern was absolute. The laughter stopped. Even the music stuttered to nothing. Someone screamed. By morning, you were in chains. The constable didn't care that you were attacked, didn't ask who struck first. All he saw was a body on the floor and blood on your hands. Murder, he said. Your trial was held in the open square. You spoke, told the truth, every word of it. But the dead man had friends. And you? You were a nobody. Self-defense was not a right, it was an excuse. And excuses don't hold much weight when a corpse is involved. They pronounced you guilty. No deliberation, no mercy. At dawn, you were marched to the gallows. The villagers gathered, some out of curiosity, others just because it was something to watch. The priest read you your last rites. You didn't listen. You were too busy trying to remember if the man had even bled after he fell. You were sure he hadn't. But it didn't matter now. They placed the noose around your neck. The rope smelled of sweat and old wood smoke. The executioner asked if you had any last words. You said nothing, because in this world truth doesn't set you free. It just falls with the trapdoor. Debts you can't repay. It started with a small loan. Winter had been cruel that year. The snows came early and the harvest came late. You had no choice but to borrow a few silver coins, enough for grain, salt and firewood. You told yourself it was temporary. That spring would arrive and with it, work. But spring came with floods. The fields drowned, the animals sickened, and you had nothing to give back. At first, the moneylender was patient. He smiled when he passed you in the square, told you not to worry, said he understood how hard it could be for your kind. But the smile faded with each passing week. The greetings turned to warnings. The warnings became threats. Then one day, they came with iron. You were taken to the pillory, your name called aloud like a curse. Debtor, thief by silence. The crowd gathered not out of cruelty but custom. Debt was a sin in the eyes of the church, a rot that spread. To forgive it was to invite ruin. They locked you in the debtor's cage. It stood in the square like a monument, wrought iron, narrow as a coffin. You couldn't sit, couldn't stretch, couldn't sleep. Children pointed at you. Old women crossed themselves as they passed. The moneylender watched from the tavern window, sipping spiced wine, your name already scratched from his ledger. They left you there for days. People threw scraps at your feet. Some came to jeer, others to stare and remind themselves why they paid on time. You became a warning. You tried to count the hours, but hunger and cold stole the numbers from your mind. Your skin cracked from the wind. Your legs stopped responding. You forgot what warm felt like. Eventually someone paid your release, not out of kindness, but because they wanted the cage for someone else. You were let out, but not free. You still owed, and now you owed your shame too. No one would hire you. No one would marry you. You were marked, not with ink or fire, but something worse, memory. In the Middle Ages, debt wasn't a problem. It was a crime. Running from your lord. You knew the rules. You were born on that manor, just like your father, and his before him. You tilled the same soil, paid the same dues, bowed to the same lord. You were not a slave, not exactly, but freedom. That was a word only whispered by minstrels and madmen. Then came the storm, a real one, with black skies and thunder like war drums. The harvest was ruined. The barns were empty. Your lord raised the taxes anyway. His wine flowed. His dogs ate better than your children. So one night, beneath the moon half swallowed by cloud, you ran. You didn't take much. A knife, a crust of bread, your mother's faded rosary. You followed the river south, sleeping in hedgerows, avoiding roads. You shaved your beard, changed your name. You found work in a town where no one asked questions. For a while, you almost believed you'd escaped. Then, one morning, 2 men arrived. They weren't dressed like knights, but they had papers, and they had a name, your name. They said your lord had tracked you down through the parish registry. He claimed your labour, your life. You were not a man, but property. You ran again, but it was no use. They caught you near the edge of the woods, their dogs faster than your breath. You were shackled and marched back to the manor like stolen cattle. The punishment was not death. That would waste your labor. Instead, you were branded. A hot iron pressed to your forearm, the mark of a runaway. A permanent reminder that you had tried to break the natural order. Then came the iron collar. Not tight, but heavy. Always heavy. You wore it for a year. Everyone who saw it knew what you were. You weren't a man anymore. You were a lesson. Some nights you dreamed of the river, of freedom, but the collar was always there. Even in dreams, it jingled. In the Middle Ages, your body belonged to the land, and the land belonged to someone else. Breaking into the church. You didn't go in to steal. You tell yourself that even now, as your wrists are bound behind your back with coarse rope and the priest's eyes bore into you like twin blades, you weren't looking for riches, only shelter, a loaf of bread left for the poor, a place to sleep where the wind didn't claw through your ribs, but you didn't enter through the door. That was the mistake. The chapel was silent when you slipped in through the vestry window. Candles burned low. Saints looked down at you from their painted glass thrones, their faces twisted into unreadable expressions. You crossed yourself, out of habit more than faith, and stepped lightly. You found nothing but shadows and silence. Then your foot caught a chalice on the altar. It tipped, hit the stone floor, and rang like a bell of doom. That's when they caught you. By morning, the entire village knew. The priest called it sacrilege. The reeve called it burglary. The bishop's man, freshly arrived with his silver-ringed fingers and quiet disdain, called it profanation. You were not just a thief, they said. You were a defiler. A man who laid hands on the sacred. No one asked what you had actually taken. It didn't matter. They stripped you to your shift and led you through the square with a placard around your neck. He stole from God. Behind you, an altar boy rang a bell with every step so all would see, all would remember. Then came the lashings. One for every coin's worth they claimed you might have stolen, though no item was missing. You bled before the statue of Saint Bartholomew, and they said it was justice. But the worst was yet to come. You were excommunicated, banished from the church. You could no longer marry, could not be buried in consecrated ground. People crossed the road to avoid your gaze. Mothers whispered to their children to keep clear of your shadow. You had no name anymore, only your crime. In the Middle Ages, to trespass against the church was to trespass against heaven itself. Love across the line. You didn't plan to fall in love. It just happened. She was the daughter of a minor noble, not royal, but far above your station. You met by accident when her horse threw a shoe outside the smithy. You helped calm the beast, and she smiled at you like you weren't invisible. From that moment, you were ruined. She found excuses to pass by your cottage. You left flowers where only she would see. There were stolen glances at church, brief touches as you passed, and eventually a night beneath the orchard trees when the spring air smelled of blossoms and danger. You told no one. She told no one. But in a world where secrets are traded like coin, it couldn't last. Her father found the letter you wrote, clumsy poetry, folded beneath her pillow. You were taken before you even knew you'd been discovered, pulled from your bed by guards in chainmail, your boots barely on before you were hauled to the manor. They didn't ask questions. To seduce a noble's daughter as a commoner was not love, it was corruption. And worse, treasonous intent to climb above your place. They made you confess, not with blades, but with threats. They said they would marry her off to a stranger twice her age. They said they would cut out your tongue if you lied again. You told them everything. She denied it all. You were paraded through the square with a rope around your neck, your tunic torn, your back branded with the symbol of a fornicator. The villagers whispered, but not with sympathy. Love between classes was unnatural, they said. Dangerous, infectious. They offered you two choices, exile or castration. You chose exile. You walked for weeks past borders, past towns that had never heard your name. You slept in ditches. You dreamed of her hair, her laugh, the orchard. She was married within the year. You never returned. In the Middle Ages, love wasn't a fairy tale, it was a noose. The justice that slept lightly. The fire has burned low now. Only embers remain, warm and watchful in the dark. You lie there, still, eyes closed, but you can feel the weight of centuries pressing against your chest. You've walked the crooked roads of justice in the Middle Ages. You've stood before the lash, the blade, the gallows, and maybe, just maybe, you understand now. Justice wasn't blind back then. It saw everything, especially weakness. You were punished for stealing bread, for asking questions, for loving the wrong person, for dressing above your place. You were judged not by truth or fairness, but by fear, by order, by power. And yet, there were moments, fleeting and fragile, when you remembered that you were human, when your heart still beat wildly with love or hunger or hope. But those things didn't matter, not here, not in a world where laws protected the powerful and crushed the poor, where the church and the crown ruled together and your life could end with a whisper or a wrong look. Tonight, you survived all 10 crimes. Barely. You felt the branding iron, smelled the smoke from the pyre, watched the crowd gather, not to mourn, but to watch, to punish, to feel safe, because it wasn't them. And now, the night is quiet again. The gallows are empty. The iron cage hangs still. The stake is cold. You may open your eyes, or let them stay closed. The past won't chase you anymore, but remember what it taught you. Mercy was rare, justice was cruel, and even innocence was not enough. Sleep now, if you can.